Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, after getting Keenan Allen earlier in the offseason and signing DeAndre Swift. And look, the Swift contract's terrible, but he's still going to like play and be halfway decent. Like the contract can be bad, but the player's still pretty decent when he plays. And then when he doesn't, like another running back will play and play pretty decent because that's how it goes. And Gerald Everett as well. Like Caleb Williams, I don't think it's hyperbole when people say it might be the best situation a number one pick has ever walked into, or at least like in the on the short list. It really is. It's something else. And Odunze, pretty awesome. Win total for the Bears, with Matt Eberflus back as head coach, is 8.5. Ken, give me your thoughts on the Chicago Bears here, the day after night one of the NFL draft.
Yeah, they're going to be one of the most interesting teams to talk about as we get to the start of the season from a betting standpoint, because like there are teams with low win totals that picked early last night too. There are teams with low win totals that feel like they have no upside, and there are teams with low win totals that do. I think Washington's got like a pretty good amount of upside, and we'll see how Daniels plays. But there are teams with bad win totals. We think they're going to be bad. We know who like the really good teams are, like the likelihood that the Niners or the Chiefs or the Ravens are bad next year. And then you've got all of these teams like 7.5, 8, 8.5, 9, 9.5, all these teams in the middle. And some of them seem like they have more upside than others because of like unknowns. And so I can give you an opinion on like, hey, like, here's what I think the Bears are going to be, or, here's just like kind of how I see this going, but it would be so much more of a guess than with every other team, right? Because it's, we do this exercise, coach, and this is like something I've done for like a couple of years. And I like things that are simple that people that listen to the show can like totally get and apply and like think about this way. So like coach, quarterback, win total, like, does this make sense? So it's like, all right, like, Lamar Jackson, John Harbaugh, 11.5. Got it. Like, no problem. Like, no problem. Lamar just won MVP. Like, no problem at all. Like, Josh Allen, Sean McDermott, 10.5. Like, I don't care how many guys they trade. Great. 10.5. No problem. And it's, you get to this one, you go all the way down if you want to go in whatever, alphabetical order or by win total. And you're like, all right, Caleb Williams, Matt Eberflus, 8.5. And I think, like, you could talk yourself into that it's wildly wrong both ways, like, depending on how you feel about that pairing. I'm always going to be more like, I'm pretty negative towards Matt Eberflus. I had the Bears win total under aggressively last year. I don't think he's particularly good. And now you throw him Caleb and a lot of talent, and that's great, and they should be better. But the market also expects them to be better. This win total's higher than it was last year. And the division's probably better because now we know Jordan Love's really good. And we'll see what Minnesota does, but like, they have the kind of the same.
They're not going to be an embarrassment.
Yeah, right.
Minnesota's not going to be an embarrassment. There's no way.
It would seem less likely they're going to start like 9 quarterbacks like they did last year than they will this year, just because out of sheer randomness, and like usually you don't start that many quarterbacks. So I get to this number, and I'm just more inclined to go under. Like, if you had to make me pick, just because Like, now that Caleb's there, I'm supposed to be like, yeah, that Matt Eberflus guy, like, he's pretty good. He's actually pretty awesome. I want to buy him. I want to buy stock in him. I don't want to buy stock in him. Caleb might be really good, and maybe that determines the number, but, like, Eberflus and a rookie quarterback, no matter how talented, and 8.5, just intuitively seems a little bit too high to me. And so I don't know if I'm going to bet the under when we get closer to the start of the season. This is months and months and months away from happening. But my first thought would just be that pairing and that number, especially in that division, just seems like a little bit too high. And it doesn't mean they can't overperform, but that was my first thought.
The hype around this team and the hype around Caleb Williams is going to be at such a fever pitch that the expectation, I think, and this is not to criticize like Chicago sports fans, it would be worse in New York, like where I'm from. So just saying that, like, it's not, I'm not banging on Chicago, but I think that if things are going south early for Caleb Williams, which I think is to be expected, also like the betting market isn't expecting them to go 12-5. I think they're gonna be a little tough on him. Like, I don't know if he's gonna get booed at games, but I don't know like how smooth this is going to be with the way that Caleb handled some of the losses at USC. I'm not saying he's going to be bad. I think he's going to be really good. I wish my favorite team had him. Just like something to think about here with the expectations are going to be out of control for the Bears. I said this a while ago, and I'll hold to this as we approach the start of the season. I think they're going to be a really chic team, like picked team to make the playoffs, to do like great things this season. And I think the hype around Caleb Williams, it will only intensify as we approach the start of the season.
A lot of optimism and a lot of reason to be excited about this year. How are you feeling about how the Bears did last night, and what you think they'll do this season?
Well, I'm all in with everything that's happened so far. Yes, it's a very unique situation because generally, like when we were at Dallas and we drafted Troy Aikman, he had no help. We had no supporting cast. I think he got sacked 9 times in his first game, and it was a tough first couple of years for Troy, which is usually the standard. If you got the first pick in the draft, generally you're the worst team in the league. You got no players. You can't win. It's kind of a restart. But this is so different here in Chicago because, they got a top 10 defense. They've been first or second in the league in running the football the last couple of years. They made some nice trades. I mean, Montez Sweat and Keenan Allen, and they've added some really good players on both sides of the ball. All they needed really was a quarterback to come in and I don't want to say manage the game, but give them a chance in the fourth quarter to be able to win a game if they're behind or if they're tied. And I think that's happened with Caleb Williams. I know that Chicago's fired up. I'll tell you the best thing that's happened is about a week ago is when it really kind of came to light that, hey, he's going to be a Bear. The Bears weren't – the Chicago Bears, Ryan Poles, he didn't admit it publicly, but he insinuated. And all of a sudden, Caleb started talking about Chicago, the great city. He was doing a bunch of interviews, and he really grew on – he was saying the right things, and he grew on the people here in Chicago. So, that time before the draft really, I think, was important to him leading up to when he became the first pick as far as people getting to know him.
So honeymoon period, I think it's fair to say right now, with Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, and the Chicago Bears. The games are going to start in September, and the win total, coach, for the Chicago Bears as it stands right now is 8.5. And I will use that as an opportunity to ask you this question. And this can be a pencil, not pen answer. We'll see what happens with the rest of the draft and the offseason. Will the Chicago Bears finish above or below 500 this season in a really, really tough division?
No, they'll be above 500. I believe they're going to be a playoff team. I really do. Because the other teams in our division are tough. They're very similar. Minnesota's going to be playing with J.J. McCarthy, a rookie. Jordan Love is just really working into a second season as a starter. Overall in the division, Detroit is the team to beat, obviously. But I really think that the Bears are in a position. They got the last place schedule. I don't know if that means anything or not. It generally helps a little bit. I believe that they will win more than 500. But I'm going to take it a step farther. I think they're going to be a playoff team this year.
If Penix is awesome, no one's going to look back on this and say it was a bad pick for Atlanta. And it's kind of the same way that the Jordan Love situation is going to work out with Green Bay. But it's a sports betting show, right? So let's talk about Atlanta this season, who pass over an opportunity to draft someone on defense, maybe Dallas Turner, Jared Verse, Latu, whomever. Could have drafted Rome Odunze to pair with Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson and Kirk Cousins in this new offense. So they draft a guy who's not going to play this year. And they don't want him to play this year. They want Kirk Cousins to play this year. Win total is 9.5, juiced way over. Ken, where are you at right now on the Atlanta Falcons?
Yeah, look, I think with the other teams that drafted rookie quarterbacks, it's like a volatility conversation, right? Because they're going to play early. Even if you don't think McCarthy's going to play from week one, he's probably going to play at some point this year. And so, all those teams, Patriots, Commanders, Vikings, it's maybe Denver, who we'll talk about at some point too. That's not what this is. So even though it's like the most surprising pick and it's crazy and he's like an older rookie quarterback and it's like all anybody wants to talk about, like there is some stability to the idea of you can't think of any more stable quarterbacks than Kirk Cousins, honestly. They're like jokes about how it's like basically like you want to like make the playoffs and not win, or not win primetime games rather, or like be pretty good. Like this is your guy. So when we do the win total conversation, I always just like the coach quarterback tandem and does this make sense? So we didn't do it with Daniel Jones in the last segment where it's like, look, whatever upside you want to apply to Daniel Jones, like Brian Dable, Daniel Jones 6.5 is either probably right on the money or optimistic. Like, I mean, it's really like that's kind of what it is. Like, sorry, like I just think that's what it is. That's my opinion. I don't think there's an argument that it's crazy different than that. And the interesting thing about the Atlanta pairing is like, okay, like Kirk Cousins, Raheem Morris, like that is a very respectable duo that needs some credit in the market, and you consider also the division that they play in. Sure, in addition to that, it's kind of just like if it's 9.5 way over, like, is that like Kirk Cousins, Raheem Morris? Like, if, like, for example, there's a very real chance, like, I mean, we're percentage points away probably from somebody choosing to deal a 10 juiced under, right, on the Atlanta Falcons. And if it's like Kirk Cousins at this point in his career, Raheem Morris 10, that's like, it's a little tough to get to, just to be honest. Like, it's close. This isn't one that I think is crazy off, but if it is off, it's probably a little bit too high. Even if, and people are going to argue the division, and I would just remind people, this is what got people into trouble with the Saints last year, and why I had, like, by far the biggest win total position on their under, because it was kind of the same thing. Raheem Morris isn't Dennis Allen, but, like, you get the idea. It's like Derek Carr, Dennis Allen, 9.5, 10 was the conversation last year, and there were 10s with very reasonable under attached to them, and it's kind of the same. Well, but the schedule's so easy, and when the schedule comes out for this, I'm sure we'll say some of the same stuff. And it's like, I like the coach quarterback thing for that reason. It like kind of cuts through whatever schedule games you want to play with the teams. And it's like, no, but like what is the real value of this pairing? And to me, like Kirk Cousins old off a serious injury and Raheem Morris kind of feels like a 9. Like that's what kind of what it feels like to me. So like we're not way off here, and it's not like I'm running to bet this in April, but really, really tough to get. And when the schedule starts pulling it away like that, that's when you kind of like raise your eyebrows and you go like, is that really what this is? Or is the schedule really tough to predict and this is a 9-8 team more often? What are you doing with the rest of this series? We haven't talked about this game yet, Noops, like in great detail, because we did NFL draft the entire first hour of the show, really, but kind of a unique scheduling quirk, right? And you're like a Sixers fan, you're a Joel Embiid fan. Couldn't cook up a schedule that's any better for him rehabbing than multiple days between games 2 and 3, which was last night, and then multiple days between game 3 and game 4, which would be 2 days from now. It is an early start, I guess, for what it's worth, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Sixers 4.5. They trail 2-1 in the series. Anything on game 4, and what is your best guess for how the series plays out?
And nothing for game 4 yet. I'm still kind of waiting to see. We're basically looking at pretty much the same line. Sixers are 4.5-point favorites. I guess that's down that closer to 5.5. The total pretty much right in the same spot. And it's one of those things where, Ken, I like that schedule for the short term, but in a series that I think is going to end up going 5, 6, 7 games, I'd honestly rather have the rest a little bit later on in between the travel spots, because it just all comes down to Joel Embiid and his ability to play himself into shape on a knee that is not 100%. He has really looked tired. Again, even last game as he was pushing through, you see him just kind of bent over, heaving at the chest. He is constantly thinking about that knee, and it's just, I think, a matter of time where you're going to get through this series. And even if the Sixers can somehow win, I think it really does limit what they do going forward. New York looks pretty solid, had a down game in game 3. I think they'll find a way to bounce back. I think the best thing for Philadelphia might be the return of DeAnthony Melton, though. He is someone that was really important to this team early on. He's been out with a back injury for about a month at this point. If he can come back and be solid here, I think that's a real advantage for Philadelphia to have a guard defender there on the roster, to have someone who's actually a pretty good rebounder on the roster for a team that struggled. So I'm not as optimistic as I was at the beginning of the series about the Sixers' chances. And if they can somehow find a way to get this done quickly, that's better. If we end up going to 7 games, it's going to be tough for Embiid to be healthy, and I think favors the Knicks.
Leave the fandom aside here and give us an objective answer. Is Joel Embiid a dirty player? Did he play dirty in game 3 on Thursday night against the New York Knicks?
He did have one particular play that I would have to describe as dirty, but I don't think that I could describe him in totality as a dirty
should he
player.
Should he have been ejected from the game? Fandom aside, speaking objectively, for almost hurting Mitchell Robinson.
I plead the fifth.
You're not allowed to. This is not hoops.
I really don't know.
This is not hoops with Noops. Should he have been ejected from the game? Yes or no?
I think you could make a case for it. I don't necessarily think so. I think it was just under the line, but I could see how certain people would see that. It was very close.
What a jerk.
Mitchell Robinson listed questionable for Game 4, by the way, and obviously saw a lot of Precious Achua in the second half of that game against it. Not quite as good as someone who watched Mitchell Robinson get about 900 offensive rebounds in the first 2 games of the series. That is something Nick knows about. So like that sounded really smart, Noops. Except like, okay, like who is going to win the series and in how many games?
I think it's probably the Knicks in 7. Again, the Sixers are going to have to close it out in 6, but I just don't feel confident that, again, Embiid can continue to play at a high rate for almost 40 minutes a night.